The difference between a person who is merely noticed and a person who commands a room is not found in their vocabulary or their attire. It is found in the invisible infrastructure of their presence. Most people move through the world in a state of social reactivity. They are like small boats on a choppy sea, tossed about by the opinions, moods, and commands of others. They ask for permission with their eyes. They apologize for their existence with their posture, and they dilute their authority with every tentative word they speak. This is the sub-sovereign trap. It is a biological and psychological state of low-status signaling that tells the world you are a candidate, not a commander. But the professional, the individual who has mastered the art of influence, operates from a completely different frequency. They don't try to influence, they are the influence. They have built an internal fortress of certainty that naturally bends the environment to their will. This is not magic, it is mechanics. It is the application of high-status psychology to every thought, every syllable, and every movement. When you see a professional operator enter a high-stakes environment, you are witnessing the physics of presence. They possess a density of identity that makes it impossible for others to ignore them. They don't scan the room for approval, the room scans them for direction. They don't rush to speak, they allow the silence to grow until their words carry the weight of a physical strike. This is the architecture of command. It is the ability to think with surgical clarity, speak with heavy tonality, and influence through the sheer mass of your internal frame. If you have spent your life feeling overlooked, undervalued, or interrupted, it is not because you lack talent or intelligence. It is because you are leaking authority through 1,000 micro-signals of insecurity. You are performing for an audience that is waiting for you to lead them. In this masterclass of influence, we are going to dismantle the habits of the hesitant and install the operating system of the professional. We will move through 10 chapters of strategic rewiring. We will deconstruct fortress cognition to harden your thoughts against external manipulation. We will master acoustic authority to ensure your voice carries the frequency of power. We will analyze the physics of the frame to ensure you are the one defining reality in every interaction. This is the second rise of your professional persona. You are moving from the applicant to the authority. You are moving from the chatter to the signal. You are moving from being a victim of the room to being the architect of the room. This is the definitive guide on how to think, speak, and influence like a pro. Before we begin the demolition of your old patterns and the construction of your new sovereignty, ensure you are locked in to this frequency. If you are ready to stop auditioning for the life you already own and start commanding the respect you deserve, subscribe to the channel now. By doing so, you are signaling to your subconscious that you are no longer a spectator of high-performance living, but an active participant in your own architecture of command. You are joining a network of sovereigns who refuse to be moved by the fickle winds of public opinion. Your sovereign rise starts the moment you claim this information as your own. Now let us begin with Chapter 1, the Intellectual Fortress. Chapter 1, the Intellectual Fortress. The mechanics of cognitive density. The professional does not begin their influence with a word or a gesture. They begin with a structural overhaul of their internal world. Most people possess what can be termed porous cognition. Their thoughts are like a thin membrane, easily punctured by a critical comment, a shifting social trend, or the subtle disapproval of a peer. When they enter a room, they are subconsciously scanning for the correct opinion to hold. They wait for a consensus to form before they dare to anchor themselves. This is a state of intellectual vagrancy. It signals to everyone in the environment that your mind is for rent and your convictions are negotiable. But the professional, the individual who operates with sovereign authority, understands the architecture of the intellectual fortress. You move from seeking the truth in the eyes of others to bringing the truth with you as a physical weight. You realize that influence is not a negotiation of ideas, it is a displacement of lower density thoughts by a higher density frame. Think about the physics of atmospheric pressure. Air always moves from a high pressure system to a low pressure system. Influence operates on the exact same principle. If you enter a conversation with high density certainty, The low-density doubt of others will naturally rush to fill the vacuum you create. Most people are low-pressure systems. They are full of maybe, perhaps, and I think. They are wavering. When they encounter a high-pressure system, a person who has hardened their thoughts into a fortress, they don't just listen to them, they orbit them. To build this fortress, you must first undergo a clinical audit of first principles. You must stop arguing from emotion or hearsay and start arguing from mechanics. You strip every problem down to its atomic level until you find the immutable law that governs it. By the time you open your mouth, your logic is not a theory. It is a structure that has already survived the siege of your own critical scrutiny. This cognitive density requires you to master the law of intellectual detachment. One of the greatest leaks of authority in the amateur is the emotional attachment to being right. When an amateur is challenged, they flinch. They feel a heat in their neck because their ego is fused to their argument. This reactivity is a low-status signal. It tells the observer that your internal peace is dependent on their agreement. The professional, however, possesses a detachment shield. You hold your ideas in front of you like tools, not identities. If an idea is proven inefficient, you discard it and upgrade to a better one without a flicker of emotional distress. This clinical fluidity is intimidating to the insecure. It signals that you are chasing the result, not the applause. When you are unoffendable, you are unstoppable. You move from the role of the defendant to the role of the scientist. Consider the trap of the mental mirror. Most people use the reactions of others as a mirror to see if their thoughts are valid. If the room frowns, they soften their stance. If the room nods, they expand. This is reactionary thinking. It makes you predictable and easily manipulated. The sovereign thinker operates with internal validation loops. You decide the validity of your logic in the private theater of your own mind before you step into the social arena. You do not look at the audience to find out if you are correct. You look at the audience to see if they are capable of understanding your correctness. This reversal of the gaze is the foundation of professional influence. It forces the room to adjust to your frequency. You move from being the reflection to being the source. You must also recognize the hierarchy of the information filter. In an age of infinite noise, the professional mind is a filter, not a sponge. Most people absorb the anxiety, the outrage, and the mediocrity of their digital environment. They think in headlines and speak in cliches. This cognitive clutter dilutes your authority. To build your fortress, you must practice information sanitization. You refuse to consume low-value data. You protect your mental real estate from the squatters of public opinion. You only allow high-density signals into your inner sanctum. This exclusivity of thought creates an aura of depth. When you do speak, people sense that your words are backed by a massive reservoir of unpolluted logic. You move from the chatter to the signal. Think about the physics of sovereign certainty. Certainty is not loudness, it is weight. A pro can disagree with an entire room without raising their voice. They simply state their position as a fact of nature. This unshakable posture triggers a survival instinct in the listener's brain. The human animal is programmed to follow the most certain entity in the environment during times of chaos. By becoming the most certain thought leader in the space, you inherit the leadership by default. You do not ask for the lead, you occupy it. You move from the suggestion to the command. This intellectual fortress requires the death of the need to be understood. Most people over-explain because they are terrified of being misinterpreted or judged. They clutter their arguments with justifications, and this is sub-sovereign behavior. The professional understands that the truth does not need a defense. You state your premise and allow it to stand on its own legs. If someone misunderstands you, that is their deficiency, not yours. This refusal to chase the listener creates a vacuum that pulls the listener toward you. You move from the petitioner to the oracle. Start practicing the thought-hardening drill. Today, identify one conviction you hold. Audit it. Strip away the emotions and the social pressures. Find the mechanical reason why it is true. Once you find it, state it once in a conversation today without adding a justification. Observe the tension that arises. Do not break that tension. Own it. You are building the first wall of your fortress. You are becoming dense. The intellectual fortress is the engine room of your sovereign rise. It is the reason why you can never be shaken by the winds of the world. Chapter 2. Acoustic authority, the frequency of power. If the intellectual fortress is the engine of your influence, then your voice is the transmission system that delivers that power to the world. Most people treat speech as a casual tool for data transfer, but the professional understands that every syllable is a physical event. In the architecture of command, your voice is not just a carrier of information, it is the acoustic signal of your status. Amateurs speak with what can be described as airy energy. Their voices are thin, their pitch is often forced into higher registers by social anxiety, and they suffer from the upward inflection trap, ending sentences as if they are asking a question. This signals to the listener's primitive brain that the speaker is checking for permission or approval. It is a sub-sovereign frequency. But the professional operates with acoustic authority. You move from making noise to projecting mass. Think about the physics of sound. Lower frequencies carry more energy and travel further through physical barriers. In human social dynamics, a deeper, resonant tone is biologically linked to calm dominance. This is not about having a naturally deep voice. It is about where the voice is seated. Most people speak from the throat or the mouth, the areas most affected by the constriction of stress. The professional speaks from the core, allowing the breath to support the weight of the words, and this creates a heavy tonality that demands attention without requiring volume. When you speak with this resonance, you aren't competing for the room's ears, you are vibrating the room's atmosphere. You move from the chirp of the bird to the hum of the machinery. One of the most critical components of acoustic authority is the downward inflection. This is a mechanical adjustment that changes a plea into a command. When you end a sentence with a slight drop in pitch, you are signaling finality. You are telling the listener that the thought is complete, the logic is sound, and there is no room for negotiation regarding your certainty. Conversely, upspeaking, rising in pitch at the end of a statement, invites the listener to evaluate or judge you. It is a bid for connection that looks like insecurity to a high-stakes audience. To influence like a pro, you must kill the question mark at the end of your statements. You move from "does that make sense?" to "that is the objective." This shift in frequency forces the listener to process your words rather than approve them. Consider the strategic void. Amateurs are terrified of silence. They believe that if they stop making noise, they will lose their grip on the audience. They fill the gaps with vocal litter, like, and right. These filler sounds are anxiety leaks. They tell the world that your brain is straining to keep up with the social pressure. The professional, however, weaponizes silence. You use the high status pause. You speak, and then you stop. You allow the weight of your last sentence to settle in the room. You do not rush to fill the vacuum. You own the tension that silence creates. This void acts as a filter for the audience. It forces them to lean in to hear your next signal. Silence is the oxygen of authority. When you are comfortable with nothingness, you prove that you are the master of the space. This acoustic command requires you to master tempo control. Most people speak at the rhythm of the crowd. If the environment is fast and chaotic, their speech becomes fast and chaotic. This is syncing, and it is a follower behavior. The professional sets the tempo. You speak at a deliberate pace that ignores the surrounding urgency. By speaking slightly slower and more cleanly than the average person, you force the listeners to slow down their own processing to match your rhythm. You are imposing your internal clock on the external environment. This rhythmic dominance is a powerful subconscious anchor. It tells the room that you are unhurried and therefore unthreatened. You move from the dancer to the choreographer. Think about the physics of vocal economy. A professional never uses 10 words when 3 will do. Overspeaking is a sign of status begging. It suggests that you don't believe your primary signal was strong enough to be effective, so you clutter it with excess data. This dilutes your influence. To speak like a pro, you must practice signal-to-noise optimization. You cut the fat from your sentences. You remove the qualifiers, words like just, kind of, or hopefully. These words are social padding that you use to soften the impact of your thoughts. But influence requires impact. You move from the suggestion to the strike. This acoustic authority extends to the volume of confidence. Amateurs often believe that being loud equals being powerful. This is a common error. Excessive volume is often a compensation for low-density logic. It looks performative. The professional understands that the most powerful person in the room is often the one who speaks at a normal, controlled volume and expects everyone to be quiet enough to hear them. This assumption of audibility is a massive status move. It shifts the burden of listening onto the audience. You do not shout to be heard. You speak to be obeyed. You move from the megaphone to the whisper of the storm. Start practicing the vocal anchor. Today, in every conversation, focus on landing your sentences with a downward inflection. Identify one filler word you commonly use and replace it with 1 second of absolute silence. Observe how the dynamic of the interaction changes. You will feel a rise in tension. Do not apologize for it. Hold the pause. You are retuning your instrument. You are installing the frequency of power. Acoustic authority is the physical delivery of your intellectual fortress. It is the reason why your presence is felt before your message is understood. Without it, your logic is invisible. But with it, your words are inevitable. You move from hoping they listen to knowing they hear. You are no longer talking to the room. You are commanding the atmosphere. Your voice is now a tool of the rise. Chapter 3. The physics of the frame. Defining reality. If your thoughts are your fortress and your voice is your delivery system, the frame is the field of play upon which all influence is won or lost. In every human interaction, there is an invisible boundary, a set of unspoken rules, assumptions, and values that dictates who is the lead and who is the follower. This is the social frame. Most people move through life entering the frames of others. They react to other people's jokes. They answer intrusive questions as if they are required to, and they adjust their behavior to suit the mood of the room. This is reactive living. It signals that your reality is subordinate to the reality of the environment. But the professional, the individual who influences like a pro, understands the physics of the frame. You move from adapting to the room to being the one who defines the room's reality. You realize that the person with the strongest, most stable frame always absorbs the weaker frames around them. Think about the physics of a gravity well. In space, a massive object like a planet creates a curve in space-time, forcing smaller objects to orbit it. A social frame works the same way. When you enter a conversation with an unshakable set of assumptions about your own value and the direction of the interaction, you create social gravity. Most people are low-mass objects. They are drifting, looking for a center to orbit. When they encounter a professional with a high-mass frame, they don't just agree with you. They align their entire behavior to match yours. To master this, you must first practice the assumption of value. You do not pitch an idea, you offer a solution. You do not ask for a meeting, you grant access to your time. This internal shift in weight changes the tilt of the entire interaction before a single word is spoken. One of the most powerful mechanical tools in frame control is the non-reactive pivot. Amateurs are hooked by the frames of others. If someone challenges them with a sarcastic comment or a test of their authority, the amateur reacts. They get defensive, they over-explain, or they get angry. Every reaction is a submission to the other person's frame. It proves that they have the power to move you. When the professional, however, is socially inert. When met with a challenge, you do not fight the frame, you ignore it. You look at the challenger with clinical neutrality and pivot back to your own objective as if the challenge never occurred. By refusing to play the other person's game, you invalidate their reality and reassert your own. You move from being a participant in their drama to being the director of the outcome. Consider the trap of the intrusive query. In many professional and social settings, people will test your frame by asking questions that put you on the defensive. Questions about your experience, your price, or your past failures. The amateur feels an obligation to answer, which places them in the subordinate position. The professional understands that the one asking the questions controls the frame. Instead of answering, you reframe the question or answer with a query of your own. If someone asks, "Why should we trust your strategy?" you don't list your credentials. You pivot by saying, "The real question is whether your organization is ready for the level of growth this strategy requires." This reversal forces the other person to qualify themselves to you. You move from the applicant to the auditor. This physics of the frame requires you to master internal calibration. Most people calibrate to the room. If the room is high energy, they become high energy. If the room is somber, they become somber. So this is high-level mimicry, and it is a follower trait. The professional calibrates to their own internal state and expects the room to match them. If you are calm and methodical, you maintain that frequency until the room settles into your rhythm. This is dominant calibration. It signals an immense level of internal stability. People are drawn to this stability because it provides a fixed point in a chaotic world. Even by staying the same, while the world changes, you become the frame that everyone else clings to. Think about the physics of the social vacuum. When you refuse to fill the gaps in a conversation or refuse to laugh at a low-value joke, you create a vacuum of meaning. The other person will feel the weight of this void and scramble to fill it by seeking your approval. This is a massive leverage point. By doing less, you gain more influence. You move from performing for the room to observing the room's performance. This observational posture is the mark of an elite influencer. It signals that you are the judge and the environment is the specimen. You move from the noise to the silence. This frame control extends to digital influence and written communication. A professional never pleads in an email. You do not use "I was just wondering" or "I hope this is okay." These are weak frame signals. Instead, you use declarative framing. "I have carved out time on Tuesday at 2 p.m. for our call." You state the reality you want to see. Because you behave as if the outcome is already decided, the other person subconsciously accepts that frame as the path of least resistance. You design the future by framing the present. You move from the negotiator to the architect. Start practicing the frame hold. Today, when someone interrupts you or challenges your logic, do not speed up your speech and do not defend yourself. Pause, look at them for 2 seconds, then continue your original thought as if the interruption was irrelevant noise. Observe how they recede and align with your flow. You are exercising your social mass. You are becoming the center of gravity. The physics of the frame is the battlefield of your sovereign rise. It is the reason why you can win without fighting. Without it, you are at the mercy of the strongest personality in the room. But with it, you are the strongest personality in every room. You move from asking "what do they want?" to knowing this is what is happening. You are no longer fitting into the world, you are making the world fit you. Your frame is now absolute. Chapter 4. The Predator's Presence. The physical signal of authority. If your thoughts are the fortress and your voice is the frequency, and your physical body is the biological broadcast tower. Most people believe that influence is something that happens once they begin to speak, but the professional understands that the verdict of status is reached by the room within the first 3 seconds of your entry. This is not a conscious decision made by the audience. It is a primal, neurological assessment performed by the human brain's ancient survival circuitry. Most individuals project what can be termed prey vibration. They enter a space with high fidget energy. Their eyes are darting to scan for exits or check for approval, and their physical posture is contracted, as if they are trying to occupy the smallest possible amount of space to avoid being perceived as a threat. This is a sub-sovereign signal, but the professional operates with the predator's presence. When you move from hoping to be accepted to owning the territory, think about the physics of potential energy. A coiled spring or a heavy boulder at the top of a hill possesses immense power without moving a single inch. This is the hallmark of professional presence: kinetic stillness. Amateurs are leaky. They bleed energy through constant, purposeless movement, adjusting their glasses, tapping their feet, or touching their face. These are self-soothing behaviors that signal to the observer that your nervous system is overloaded by the social pressure of the room. The professional, however, is physically economical. You move only when there is a strategic reason to move. So your stillness is not stiffness, which is just another form of tension, but a heavy relaxation. It signals that you are so comfortable in your own skin and so certain of your position that you have no need to readjust for the world. You move from the jitter of the insect to the gravity of the mountain. One of the most critical mechanical adjustments in professional presence is the economy of motion. When someone calls your name or asks a question from the side, the amateur snaps their head toward the sound. This startle response is a high reactivity, low status signal. It tells the room that the environment has the power to jolt you. The professional moves with torso lead. You turn your entire body as one solid unit, slowly and deliberately. And this heavy rotation signals that you are the center of the universe and that the world must wait for your alignment. It communicates that you are unhurried and unthreatened. This physical slowness is a high-status multiplier. By refusing to be rushed by the tempo of the room, you force the room to decelerate to match your frequency. You move from the dancer to the choreographer. Consider the physics of the gaze surplus. In the animal kingdom, the ability to maintain eye contact is a direct proxy for dominance. Amateurs suffer from visual submissiveness. They look away first, they look down when they are thinking, or they blink excessively. This signals that they find the visual weight of the other person unbearable. The professional, however, invests in the gaze. You hold eye contact for 1 second longer than is socially comfortable. This is not a stare down of aggression, which is just reactive anger, but a relaxed intensity. It signals that you are observing the other person more than they are judging you. This visual dominance acts as a psychological anchor. It tells the other person's subconscious that you are the predator and they are the specimen. You move from the seen to the seer. This physical authority requires you to master spatial expansion. Most people are space minimizers. They keep their elbows tucked in, their legs crossed tight, and their hands hidden. This is defensive posturing. The professional is a space claimer. You take up lateral space. You drape your arm over the back of a chair. You lean back instead of leaning in. This expansive posture is biologically linked to high testosterone and low cortisol. It tells the room that you fear no attack. By occupying the environment, you declare that the environment belongs to your frame. This physical sovereignty is infectious. People will naturally yield territory to you because your body language says that yielding is the only logical response. You move from the guest to the landlord. Think about the physics of the social break. Influence is often about the ability to stop the momentum of others. When someone is rushing you or over-talking you, the amateur tries to shout over them. The professional uses physical deceleration. You slow down your blinking rate, you lower your shoulders, and you increase the heaviness of your seat. This physical braking drains the frantic energy out of the interaction. It is impossible for someone to maintain a high anxiety tempo when the person they are talking to is breathing from their core and moving like molten lead. You neutralize the agitation of others through the sheer mass of your calm. You move from the friction to the lubricant. This predator's presence extends to your entry and exit. A professional never sneaks into a room. You pause at the threshold. You take the visual data of the room before you step into it. This threshold pause forces the room to notice your arrival on your terms. Likewise, and when you leave, you do not fade out or apologize. You state your departure as a fact and walk with a linear, purposeful gait. You do not look back. This linear movement signals that you are moving toward a mission that is more important than the current social gathering. You move from the lingerer to the operator. Start practicing the stillness drill. Today, in one high-stakes meeting or social interaction, consciously decide to not move a single limb unless it is functionally necessary. Refuse to fidget. Refuse to nod excessively. Keep your hands visible and still. Observe how much louder your voice sounds when it isn't competing with distracting body language. You are calibrating your broadcast tower. You are installing the physical signal of command. The predator's presence is the biological foundation of your sovereign rise. It is the reason why people give way to you in crowded hallways and listen to you in silent boardrooms. Without it, your words lack weight, but with it, your existence is an argument that cannot be refuted. You move from asking, "Am I okay?" to knowing, "I am here." You are no longer performing for the eyes of the world, because you are defining what the world sees. Your presence is now absolute. Chapter 5. Strategic Silence, the Vacuum of Authority. If the previous chapters have taught you how to build the fortress and project the signal, Chapter 5 is about the most misunderstood weapon in the professional's arsenal, the absence of signal. In the architecture of command, your words are your currency, and like any currency, their value is determined by their scarcity. Most people suffer from verbal inflation. They are so terrified of being forgotten, misunderstood, or judged that they flood the environment with a constant stream of low-value noise. They explain, they justify, they check in, and they chatter. And this vocal leakage tells the world that your thoughts are cheap and your presence is needy. But the professional, the influencer who operates with sovereign precision, understands the power of strategic silence. You move from filling the air to owning the void. You realize that silence is not empty. It is a vacuum that pulls the reality of others into your own. Think about the physics of the vacuum. In nature, a vacuum is a space devoid of matter, and because nature abhors a vacuum, the surrounding atmosphere will rush in with immense force to fill it. Influence operates on this exact mechanical principle. When you refuse to speak, you create a psychological vacuum. Most people are uncomfortable with unstructured time. They feel a primal anxiety when a conversation stops. To ease this tension, they will scramble to fill the gap. They will reveal their true intentions. They will negotiate against themselves, and they will offer information they never intended to share. By doing nothing, you force the other person to do everything. You move from the hunter to the gravity well. One of the most effective applications of strategic silence is the post-statement pause. Amateurs often deliver a strong point and then immediately dilute it by adding, "Does that make sense?" or "You know what I mean?" This is status bleeding. It tells the listener that you are uncertain of your own impact. The professional delivers the strike, the core piece of information, and then stops. You lock eye contact and hold the silence. And this acoustic wait forces the listener to digest the information completely. It signals that your word is final and requires no defense. This confidence in the pause is intimidating to the weak and commanding to the strong. You move from the pleader to the authority. Consider the trap of the social mirror. In many interactions, people use filler noise to mirror the comfort of the other person. When they laugh at unfunny jokes or agree with mundane observations just to keep the vibe smooth. This is approval-seeking mimicry. The professional refuses to mirror low-value signals. If someone says something inane or disrespectful, You do not smile to keep the peace. You provide dead silence. You look at them with neutral observation. This visual and acoustic void signals that their behavior is unacceptable or uninteresting without you having to say a single word. It forces the other person to reevaluate their frame to match yours. You move from the comedian to the judge. This mastery of silence requires you to understand the hierarchy of the information request. When a professional is asked a difficult or probing question, the amateur rushes to answer. Either they want to prove they have the solution. But speed is a low-status signal. It suggests agitation. The professional uses the 3-second delay. You receive the question, you maintain eye contact, and you wait for 3 full seconds before you begin your response. This temporal buffer tells the room that you are not threatened by the query. It signals that your brain is processing high-density data and that your answer will be deliberate and heavy. By controlling the clock, you control the status. You move from the respondent to the consultant. Think about the physics of social oxygen. In any negotiation or high-stakes meeting, the person who needs to speak the most is the person with the least power. They are expending energy to convince the environment of their value. The professional understands that silence is wealth. You conserve your vocal energy. You allow the others to exhaust themselves. By listening more than you talk, you accumulate data about their fears, desires, and weaknesses. When you finally speak, your words are targeted and lethal. You are the sniper in a room full of machine gunners. You move from the volume to the precision. This strategic silence extends to your digital presence. A professional does not overpost or instant reply. You do not engage in comment section battles. Every unnecessary interaction lowers your perceived value. By being shown selectively, silent, you create an aura of unreachability. You force the world to wonder what you are thinking. This mystery is a powerful influence multiplier. People ascribe more wisdom to the person who says nothing than the person who says an everything. You build mythology through omission. You move from the chatter to the legend. Start practicing the silent anchor. Today, in one interaction, decide that you will not be the one to break a pause. If the conversation stops, maintain your posture and wait. Observe the other person's discomfort. Notice how they scramble to fill the air. Realize that the power has shifted to you simply because you stayed still. You are exercising your sovereign vacuum. You are becoming heavy. Strategic silence is the force multiplier of your sovereign rise. It is the reason why your voice carries more weight than a shouting crowd. Without it, your influence is noisy and fragile, but with it, your presence is absolute. You move from asking, "Did they hear me?" to knowing they are waiting for me. You are no longer fighting for a place in the noise. You are creating the space where meaning is born. Your silence is now sovereign. Chapter 6. The Architect of Choice. The Mechanics of Persuasion. In the architecture of command, the professional understands that true influence is not about forcing a decision, but about engineering the environment so that your desired outcome becomes the only logical path for the other person to take. Most people approach persuasion as a frontal assault. They use logic, begging, or pressure to try and move the other person. This is combative persuasion. It triggers the other person's psychological reactance, the natural human instinct to resist when they feel their autonomy is being threatened. The amateur tells, the professional architects. You move from convincing to choice architecture. You realize that you don't need to change their mind if you can simply remap the landscape of their options. Think about the physics of fluid dynamics. Water always follows the path of least resistance. Human decision-making follows the exact same mechanical law. If a person feels pushed, they create friction. But if you lower the banks of the channel you want them to swim in, they will flow toward your conclusion while believing they are exercising their own free will. To build this channel, you must first master the law of the false dilemma. This is the strategic presentation of limited options. Instead of asking, "Would you like to work with me?" a yes-no frame that invites rejection, the professional asks, "Would you prefer to start with the foundational audit on Monday? Or should we move straight into the execution phase on Thursday?" Both paths lead to your objective. By controlling the menu, you control the feast. One of the most powerful mechanical tools in the professional's kit is the contrast anchor. The human brain is incapable of assessing value in a vacuum. It can only assess value through comparison. Amateurs present their best offer immediately, leaving themselves nowhere to go. The professional anchors the interaction with a high-weight reference point. You present a complex, high-investment option first, not because you expect them to take it, but because it stretches their perception of what is possible. When you subsequently present your target option, it feels light, reasonable, and safe by comparison. You are manipulating the internal scale of the listener. You move from the price to the perspective. Consider the trap of the hard sell. When you push too hard, you signal scarcity. You tell the world that you need the deal more than they need the solution. This is a low-status signal. The professional uses the takeaway close. Instead of leaning in, you lean back. You audit the other person to see if they are a fit for your standards. You say, "I'm not entirely sure our current methodology is the right match for your team's speed. We typically work with organizations that can move within 24 hours. Is that something you can realistically handle?" This challenge reverses the burden of proof. Suddenly, they are persuading you. By threatening to withdraw the opportunity, you increase its gravitational pull. You move from the salesperson to the prize. This architecture of choice requires you to master the future pace anchor. Most people argue in the present tense, which is the zone of friction. The professional transports the listener into the future, where the problem is already solved. You use language of assumption. You don't say, "If we do this," you say, "When we are looking back 6 months from now at these results." This mental time travel bypasses the critical filters of the brain. It paints a reality that the listener begins to own. Once they visualize the success you've architected, they fear losing that future. You are no longer selling a service, or you are preventing a loss. You move from the proposal to the prophecy. Think about the physics of social proofing. In the animal kingdom, the herd follows the trail that is already blazed. The professional never stands alone. You frame your recommendation as the standard behavior of high performers. You use phrases like, "Typically, at this level of operations, the standard move is X." This social normalization removes the perceived risk of the decision. It signals that not choosing your path is an aberration from professional excellence. You aren't asking them to be brave. You're inviting them to be normal. You move from the innovator to the authority. This choice architecture extends to conflict resolution. When met with resistance, the amateur argues the point. The professional agrees and redirects. You validate their concern to lower their defenses. "I completely agree that the budget is a primary factor," and then immediately redirect the flow toward a higher density value, which is exactly why the ROI on this specific phase is designed to be front-loaded. By aligning with their momentum rather than blocking it, you guide their energy where you want it to go. This is psychological judo. You move from the wall to the bridge. Start practicing the alternative close. Today, in one minor decision, where to eat, when to meet, or what task to prioritize, do not ask an open-ended question. Present 2 options that both satisfy your objective. Observe how quickly the other person selects one without resistance. Notice that you have authored their choice. You are building your persuasive infrastructure. You are becoming the architect. The architect of choice is the strategic brain of your sovereign rise. It is the reason why people follow you willingly. Without it, your influence is coercive and temporary, but with it, your direction is inevitable. You move from asking, "Will they say yes?" to knowing the path is clear. You are no longer begging for a result. You are designing the conclusion. Your influence is now engineered. Chapter 7. The Currency of Trust. Building professional credibility. In the architecture of command, your influence is ultimately backed by the gold standard of your reputation. You can possess the fortress of the mind and the frequency of the voice, but if your internal currency is debased, your influence will be inflationary and temporary. Most people treat trust as a feeling or a social lubricant that happens by being nice or likable. This is the likability trap. It is a fragile, high-maintenance strategy that leaves you at the mercy of others' shifting moods. The professional, however, understands the mechanics of credibility. You move from wanting to be trusted to being a predictable force of nature. You realize that professional trust is not affection, it is reduced uncertainty. Think about the physics of structural integrity. A bridge is not trusted because it is kind or charismatic. It is trusted because it has a load-bearing capacity that has been tested and proven over time. Professional credibility operates on the same principle of predictable output. Most people are high-variance individuals. They are disciplined one day and erratic the next. They are bold in private and hesitant in public. This variance creates social friction. It forces the world to double-check your work and question your motives. To build your currency, you must practice zero-variance execution. You become the person whose yes is a contract and whose no is an unmovable wall. By removing the surprise, you gain the lead. You move from the variable to the constant. One of the most powerful mechanical tools in building this currency is the accuracy anchor. Amateurs overpromise to gain favor in the short term, which leads to reputational deflation in the long term. They use hyperbolic language, words like amazing, guaranteed, and perfect. The professional uses conservative precision. You understate your capabilities and over-deliver on your results. You speak in data points, not adjectives. When you calibrate the expectations of others to a realistic baseline and then shatter that baseline with excellence, you create a surplus of credibility. This surplus acts as interest on your influence. People begin to defer to your judgment because your track record is mechanically sound. You move from the hype to the proof. Consider the trap of the apology cycle. When a mistake happens, and in high-stakes environments, the amateur leaks authority by over-apologizing. They plead for forgiveness, which signals that they are subordinate to the other person's judgment. The professional understands the clinical correction. You acknowledge the error with zero emotional drama, identify the mechanical failure, and present the immediate solution. You do not beg for trust to be restored, as you demonstrate that the machine has been fixed. This radical accountability is high status. It tells the world that your integrity is more important than your ego. You move from the offender to the optimizer. This currency of trust requires you to master the radical transparency shield. Most people hide their limitations or mistakes because they fear judgment. This secrecy is toxic to influence. It creates a vibration of dishonesty that people sense even if they can't prove it. The professional leads with the hard truth. You disclose the risks and limitations of your proposal before the client or peer can find them. This proactive honesty disarms the critic. It signals that you are so secure in your overall value that you can afford to be honest about the gaps. Once you prove, you will tell them the bad news. They will believe you implicitly when you give them the good news. You move from the defender to the partner. Think about the physics of social capital. Every time you follow through on a minor commitment, showing up exactly on time, sending the promised link, or hitting a small deadline, you are depositing value into your credibility account. Most people neglect these microtransactions, thinking they don't matter. But the sovereign influencer knows that how you do anything is how you do everything. These consistent deposits build a buffer of trust that allows you to take massive social risks later. When you need to make a high-stakes demand, the room submits because your account is overflowing. You move from the beggar to the banker. This professional credibility extends to intellectual integrity. A professional never fakes knowledge. If you are asked a question you cannot answer, you do not clutter the air with guesses. You look the person in the eye and say, "I don't have the data on that yet, and I will have it for you by 4 p.m. This honest boundary increases the value of everything else you say. It proves that your words are tied to reality, not ego. You gain authority through the admission of limits. You move from the know-it-all to the expert. Start practicing the precision commitment. Today, refuse to use vague timelines like soon, later, or sometime this week. State a specific time and specific deliverable for every interaction. Then, hit that target with mathematical accuracy. Observe how the other person's anxiety drops and their reliance on your word increases. You are minting your own currency. You are becoming reliable. The currency of trust is the reserve of your sovereign rise. It is the reason why your influence endures when the charismatic amateurs fade. Without it, your power is a facade. But with it, your word is law. You move from asking, "Do they trust me?" to knowing they rely on me. You are no longer fighting for credibility. You are embodying it. Your trust is now absolute. Chapter 8. The Social Predator, Mastering High-Stakes Dynamics. In the architecture of command, the final evolution of influence is the transition from social participation to environmental dominance. Most people enter high-stakes environments, boardrooms, stages, or elite negotiations, as social prey. Even if they have the right thoughts and the right voice, their biology is still scanning for threats. They are looking for the judgment of the room. Their eyes are shifting to check for approval, and their energy is contracted as if they are trying to minimize their target profile. This prey vibration is a beacon for those who wish to dismiss or dominate you. But the professional, the individual who influences like a pro, understands the psychology of the social predator. This is not about aggression or harming others. It is about owning the gaze of the room. You move from being the one who is observed to being the one who defines the observation. Think about the physics of predator vision. In nature, prey animals have peripheral vision. They are looking everywhere at once because they are afraid. Predators, however, have focal vision. They lock onto an objective and ignore the distractions of the surrounding noise. Most people have peripheral social vision. They are constantly distracted by the whispers at the edge of the room or the micro-expressions of the audience. This fragmented focus is visible in your eyes, and it signals a lack of status. To influence at the highest level, you must practice predatory focus. You select your target, whether it is the person you are speaking to or the specific objective of the meeting, and you grant them 100% of your visual and mental mass. You deprioritize the background noise. This intensity is unsettling and deeply attractive. It signals that you are too important to be moved by minor distractions. You move from the scattered to the singular. One of the most critical mechanical shifts in high-stakes dynamics is the assumption of ownership. Amateurs enter a room and wait to be told where to sit, when to speak, and how to behave. They are guests in their own lives. The professional enters every space as if they are the landlord. You do not rush to the seat. You select the seat that offers the best vantage point. You do not wait for the silence to begin. You create the silence by your presence. This is not arrogance, it is environmental sovereignty. By behaving as if the room belongs to your frame, you force everyone else to negotiate their status relative to you. This unspoken claim to territory is a massive status multiplier. People will naturally yield to the person who looks like they own the floor. You move from the visitor to the host. Consider the physics of the unreacted challenge. In any elite environment, and someone will test your predatory status. They will use a sharp comment, an interruption, or a dismissive gesture to see if they can make you move. Most people react with defensiveness or agitation, which confirms they are prey. The professional responds with dynamic stillness. You receive the challenge with zero physiological change. You do not stiffen up, and you do not clench. You allow the challenger's energy to pass through you. You look at them with neutral curiosity, wait for 2 seconds of silence, and then continue your original trajectory. This refusal to react is the ultimate display of power. It tells the challenger and the room that their attacks have zero mass against your fortress. You move from the target to the mountain. This predatory mastery requires you to understand the hierarchy of the social break. In high-pressure negotiations, the amateur feels the need to speed up, to keep pace with the urgency of the other party. And this is a submission trap. The professional uses tactical deceleration. You lower your tempo as the pressure increases. You deepen your breath and slow down your vocal delivery. This counterintuitive slowing acts as a brake on the entire environment. Because you refuse to panic, the other party begins to doubt their own leverage. They subconsciously conclude that you must know something they don't. By holding your speed, you capture their momentum. You move from the frantic to the formidable. Think about the physics of the social vacuum. A professional predator knows when to disappear from the interaction. You do not cling to the conversation. You state your value, deliver your command, and then withdraw your attention. This selective availability creates a value surplus. People crave the attention of the person who is willing to walk away. By signaling that the interaction is optional for you, you make it essential for them. You leverage the fear of loss to secure the lead. You move from the seeker to the prize. This social predator mindset extends to conflict strategy. A professional never fights on the opponent's ground. If someone tries to judge you or shame you, you do not. Defend your character. You reframe the conflict as a mechanical problem. You say, "Your feelings about my style are noted. Now, let's look at why the numbers aren't meeting the objective." By refusing to descend into emotional combat, you keep your predatory height. You force the other person to climb up to your level of professionalism or reveal their own incompetence. You move from the brawler to the strategist. Start practicing the gaze hold. Today, what's in one interaction, consciously decide to be the last person to break eye contact during a pause. Keep your face relaxed, no aggressive and glaring, just steady observation. Feel the power transfer from them to you as they fidget or look away. Notice how quickly they begin to justify their position. You are calibrating your predatory presence. You are becoming heavy. The social predator is the execution phase of your sovereign rise. It is the reason why you can walk into hostile environments and emerge with the lead. Without it, your confidence is theoretical. But with it, your presence is tactical. You move from asking, "Will they like me?" to knowing they will follow me. You are no longer fitting in. You are taking over. Your dominance is now professional. Chapter 9. The Sovereign Synthesis. Living Beyond the Verdict. You have deconstructed the mechanics of the mind, the frequency of the voice, and the physics of the social frame. But to influence at the level of a true professional, you must undergo the final psychological transmutation, the sovereign synthesis. Most people, even those who achieve a measure of success, remain trapped in a state of performance anxiety. They are acting like a leader, performing confidence and simulating authority. This effort is a leak. It tells the observer that your status is fragile and dependent on their continued validation. The professional, however, moves beyond the need for a verdict. You move from fighting the noise of public opinion to being the silence that the noise cannot penetrate. You realize that true influence is not earned through approval. It is occupied through autonomy. Think about the physics of the atmosphere. Near the ground, the air is turbulent, unpredictable, and filled with the weather of daily life, the storms of criticism, the gusts of social trends, and the humidity of others' emotions. Most people live their entire lives at this altitude, constantly adjusting their sails to match the wind of the room. The professional practiced in sovereign synthesis understands altitude autonomy. You climb into the stratosphere of your own mission. At this height, the weather still exists below you, but it no longer has the mass to move you. When you hear the echoes of judgment, you do not descend to argue or defend. You increase your thrust and climb higher. This detachment is the ultimate signal of power. It tells the world that your reality is not for sale. You move from the weather to the sky. This synthesis requires you to master the law of identity density. Why does the judgment of a stranger or a peer hurt? It hurts because there is hollow space in your identity that their opinion can occupy. If you are unsure of your value, a critical comment fills that void and becomes your truth. The professional possesses total identity density. You are so packed with internal data points regarding your competence, your vision, and your results that there is zero room for external garbage to land. When judgment is thrown at you, it does not penetrate. It shatters against the surface of your certainty. This impenetrability is magnetic. People are drawn to the person who cannot be moved because it provides a fixed point in their own drifting lives. You move from the porous to the solid. Consider the trap of the post-success relapse. Many people achieve a high-status position and then immediately revert to approval seeking. To keep it, they become slaves to their reputation. They worry about what the industry thinks or how the market perceives them. This fragility erodes their influence from the inside out. The professional understands perpetual disruption. You refuse to be defined even by your own past success. You continue to evolve and change at a rate that outpaces the world's ability to judge you. And by the time the critics have formulated their verdict on your last move, you are already 3 moves ahead. This fluidity is invincible. It signals that you are not a product to be evaluated, but a force to be followed. You move from the brand to the creator. This sovereign synthesis requires you to understand the hierarchy of the internal jury. Most people have an external jury, friends, family, co-workers, and social media followers who vote on their value every day. This democracy of the ego is exhausting. The professional disbands the external jury and appoints an internal auditor. You set your own standards of excellence, integrity, and output. You only care if you met your own standards today. If the world cheers, but you missed your internal mark, you do not celebrate. If the world jeers, but you hit your internal target, you do not flinch. This self-sourced authority is the mark of an icon. It proves that you are the owner of your own life. You move from the politician to the sovereign. Think about the physics of the social echo. When you stop reacting to judgment, the judgment eventually stops happening. Critics feed on reaction. If they throw a comment and you flinch, they gain energy. But if they throw a comment and it hits a dead still and sovereign frame, the energy dies. By refusing to provide the echo, you extinguish the noise. You starve the opposition of relevance. This strategic indifference is the highest form of influence. It signals that their opinion has zero exchange value in your economy. You bankrupt the critic through omission. You move from the fighter to the ghost. This synthesis extends to your legacy of influence. A professional never apologizes for their rise. You understand that your strength authorizes the strength of others. When you live beyond the verdict, you create a vacuum of freedom that others can step into. Your lack of fear becomes a permission slip for your team, your clients, and your peers to be equally bold. This is the highest sovereignty, the power to liberate the room by refusing to be contained by its expectations. You scale your influence by becoming a living example of autonomy. You move from the leader to the architect of culture. Start practicing the verdict fast. Today, identify one action you want to take. A post, a proposal, or a physical change that you have been holding back on because you feared a negative verdict. Take that action immediately. Refuse to check the reactions. Refuse to monitor the feedback. Simply do it and move to the next task. Feel the power of the unwatched act. You are building your internal density. You are becoming autonomous. The sovereign synthesis is the completion of your rise. It is the reason why you are now unstoppable. Without it, your influence was a tactic, but with it, and your existence is a statement. You move from asking, "What will they think?" to knowing it doesn't matter what they think. You are no longer performing for the world. You are defining your own universe. Your sovereignty is now absolute. Chapter 10. The Architecture of the Icon, Legacy and the Final Command. You have reached the final layer of the architecture of command. You have deconstructed the mechanics of the mind, the frequency of the voice, and the physics of the social frame. You have transitioned from social prey to social predator, and finally to the sovereign synthesis. But there is one final evolution remaining, the transition from the individual to the icon. Most people treat their newfound influence as a personal tool, a set of skills they use to navigate meetings, close deals, or win arguments. And this is the utility phase. It is effective, but it is contained within your physical presence. The professional, the elite influencer, understands the architecture of the icon. You move from exerting influence to embodying a standard. You realize that your unjudgeable density is not just a personal trait, it is a public signal that reorganizes the social and professional hierarchy around you. You move from ignoring the noise to becoming the frequency that everyone else uses to tune their own reality. Think about the physics of the monolith. A monolith is a massive, single-piece structure that stands in the middle of a shifting landscape. It doesn't argue with the wind. It doesn't negotiate with the sand. It simply is. Because of its immovable mass, it becomes a point of reference for everyone in the territory. People navigate by it. They measure their progress against it. They seek its shade. In human dynamics, an iconic professional operates with this same monolithic stature. You are so consistent in your mission and so solid in your sovereignty that you become the fixed point in your industry or social circle. When the market is in chaos or a company is in crisis, people don't look for the loudest talker. They look for the monolith. You move from the participant to the orientation point. This architecture requires you to master the law of generational momentum. Most people think of influence in terms of this week or this quarter. They are short-term operators. The professional thinks in terms of legacy infrastructure. You realize that by killing the fear of judgment in yourself, you are cleaning the code for everyone who follows you, your employees, your children, and your mentees. Your high-status presence becomes an authority template that others download and replicate. You are no longer just succeeding, you are authorizing the success of a lineage. This is the highest command, the power to define the behavioral standards of the future. You move from the worker to the architect of culture. Consider the trap of the visible effort. As you reach the iconic level, you must shed the signs of trying. Amateurs want the world to see how hard they are working to be influential. They want credit for their discipline. This visible effort is a low-status signal, and it suggests that your authority is a performance that costs you energy to maintain. The icon operates with effortless gravity. You move, speak, and influence with a fluidity that suggests your power is natural and inexhaustible. You do not brag about your rituals. You do not explain your confidence. You allow the results to exist as inevitable outcomes of your being. This lack of friction is deeply intimidating to the straining masses. It signals that you are operating on a different plane of physics. You move from the engine to the force of nature. This iconic presence requires you to understand the hierarchy of the sovereign silence. In the final stage of command, your absence is as powerful as your presence. Most people are afraid of being forgotten, so they clutter the market with constant visibility. The icon understands scarcity authority. You withdraw from low-value interactions. You refuse to be available to everyone. You cultivate an aura of unreachability. This is not arrogance, it is valuation strategy. By limiting the supply of your attention, you skyrocket its demand. When you do appear, the weight of your presence is multiplied by the silence that preceded it. You move from the commodity to the rare element. Think about the physics of the final command. Influence is ultimately the ability to issue a command that is obeyed without resistance. In the earlier chapters, we used tonality, frame, and logic to secure this obedience, but the icon commands through expectation. You walk into a situation and simply behave as if the correct outcome is already happening. You do not ask for compliance, you assume it. This absolute assumption bypasses the critical thinking of others. Because you do not act like someone who is prepared for disagreement, the world concludes that disagreement is not an option. You rewrite the social contract through the density of your will. You move from the persuader to the commander. This architecture extends to your internal equilibrium. To remain an icon, you must be comfortable with the solitude of the rise. The stratosphere is quiet. There are fewer peers at the summit. Most people descend because they crave the noisy approval of the herd. The icon finds their approval in the precision of their own execution. You fall in love with the mechanics of the mission. You realize that the reward for becoming an icon is not fame, but autonomy. You have won the right to define reality for yourself. This internal peace is the final seal of your sovereignty. You move from the seeker to the source. Start practicing the iconic walk. Today, enter a public space, a lobby, a street, or an office, and consciously occupy the role of the monolith. Move with linear purpose. Hold your gaze on your objective. Refuse to react to distractions. Feel the environment. Adjust to your passage. Notice how people step aside, quiet down, or look up as you pass. Do not look back to see if they are watching. Know that they are. You are exercising your iconic mass. You are becoming the standard. The architecture of the icon is the immortality of your sovereign rise. It is the reason why your influence will outlive your current role. Without it, your success is a job, but with it, your life is a monument. You have moved from asking, "How do I influence?" to knowing, "I am the influence." You are no longer learning how to think, speak, and influence like a pro. You have become the definition of a pro. The second rise is complete. You are the fortress. You are the frequency. You are the frame. You are the icon. You are now in total command.